There are moments in life that split time in two, before and after, moments where something clicks so profoundly that you can't go back to who you were, because you've tasted a new vision of who you could become. And that, my friends, is the moment I'm talking about today. This will change everything. You see, most people live their lives like they're waiting for permission, waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect feeling. But the truth is, clarity doesn't come from waiting. It comes from moving, from choosing to act in alignment with what lights you up even before the path is fully clear. Because when you get clear, you get powerful. Clarity slices through distraction. It gives you permission to say no to the noise and yes to what matters. And that shift, that simple commitment to clarity, can change your entire life. But it doesn't stop there. You want transformation, you want a new level, then you have to change how you see. Because when you change your perspective, you change your possibilities. It's not your lack of resources. It's not your background, your past, or your circumstances. It's how you interpret them. You've got to look at your challenges and say, "This is not happening to me. It's happening for me." You've got to reframe every setback as training for the next breakthrough. And that mental shift, that will change everything. But here's the real magic ingredient, and most people run from it: courage, the willingness to feel the fear and go anyway. The decision to stand up, speak out, risk rejection, risk failure because what you're building is bigger than your fear. The moment you choose courage over comfort, everything begins to move. Doors open. Energy rises. People start noticing. Opportunities show up. Why? Because the universe doesn't respond to hesitation. It responds to intention backed by action. And if you really want change, it's not a one-time choice. You've got to stay in the game. You've got to show up when it's not exciting. You've got to keep your word after the mood you made the promise in has faded. Consistency is the secret, not sexy, not always celebrated, but unstoppable. Every day you show up with heart, with hustle, with purpose. You build momentum, and when you've got momentum, there's nothing you can't shift. So what's this? What is it that will change everything? It's the decision to live on purpose, to stop playing small, to stop postponing greatness, to step into clarity, shift your perspective, summon your courage, and move with consistency. Because when you do that, everything changes. The world doesn't need more people fitting in. The world needs more people on fire, and maybe, just maybe, that person is you. Now is the moment. This will change everything. Would you like this speech turned into a keynote slide deck? Or want a shorter version for social media or a video script? Clarity creates power. It's a phrase that sounds simple, almost too clean to carry the weight it truly holds. But once you experience it, once you really feel the difference between drifting and driving, between guessing and knowing, you understand that clarity isn't just helpful. It's transformational. It changes how you think, how you speak, how you show up, and how the world responds to you. Most people aren't lacking in ambition. They're not lazy or unwilling to grow. What they're missing is clarity. They're trying to climb a mountain without knowing which one they're even on. They're moving fast, but they're moving in circles. They're doing what others expect, what culture rewards, what looks good on paper. But deep down, they're unsure if any of it actually aligns with who they are or what they're here to do. That's where the exhaustion comes from. Not from the effort, but from the misalignment of effort. Clarity changes that. Clarity cuts through the noise. It gives your energy a target. It tells your time where to go and your passion where to flow. Clarity is the foundation of confidence, because when you know what you want, why it matters, and where it's taking you, you stop second-guessing yourself. You stop outsourcing your decisions. You stop asking permission to be who you already know you are inside. You begin to trust your voice again. That trust becomes fuel. When you're clear, every yes you give has more force behind it, and every no becomes easier to say without guilt. You stop people pleasing. You stop shifting just to make others comfortable. You start making bold choices, ones that may not make sense to everyone else but make perfect sense to your soul. That's the thing. Clarity isn't about perfection. It's about alignment, and alignment brings peace. Clarity brings a level of focus most people never experience. It allows you to ignore distractions not because you're disciplined, but because you're anchored. The things that used to pull you off track no longer hold power because they don't pull in the direction you're going. You begin to feel the power of momentum, the surge of progress that comes when your actions match your intentions. Clarity eliminates the mental clutter. It simplifies, and in a world that glorifies complexity, simplicity is a superpower. Most breakthroughs don't come from learning something new. They come from getting clear on something you've always known but never claimed. Something inside of you that's been waiting for your permission to rise. Clarity is about remembering that part of you. It's not always found in a journal or a workshop. Sometimes it's found in a moment of quiet. Sometimes it's found in pain. Sometimes clarity comes from hitting a wall so hard that you finally stop and ask, "Why am I doing this at all?" That question alone can open doors. Because once you get honest with yourself about what you want and what you don't, you start building a life that reflects you, not a version of you curated for approval. That's when your relationships change. Your conversations deepen. You begin attracting people who are drawn not to your performance, but to your presence. That's what clarity does. It sharpens your presence. You walk into a room differently. You speak with intention. You listen with curiosity. You stop filling silence with noise and instead learn to sit with it, to let it guide you. Clarity turns procrastination into action because you finally know what to act on. It removes the friction that slows most people down. When you're clear, you stop trying to do everything. You stop chasing every shiny opportunity. You double down on what matters. You become unavailable to anything that dilutes your mission. And that's power, not control, not force, not domination. Real power is the ability to live and lead from a place of truth, a place of vision, a place of purpose. You don't get clarity by waiting for the perfect moment. You get it by choosing to engage, by doing the work of asking better questions, by paying attention to what energizes you versus what drains you. You find clarity by getting honest, by getting still, and sometimes by getting uncomfortable. But once it arrives, even if it's just a sliver, it changes the game. It recalibrates everything. It becomes your compass, and suddenly you stop walking in circles and start walking in purpose. Clarity truly creates power. A shift in perspective changes the game, not just in a poetic feel, good kind of way, but in a real, measurable, life-altering way. Perspective is the lens through which we see the world. It shapes what we notice, what we value, and what we believe is possible. Two people can look at the same situation and walk away with completely different interpretations. Not because the facts are different, but because the frame through which they're viewing those facts is. That's the power of perspective. Change the frame, and you change the story. Change the story, and you change your reality. So many people live stuck not because they lack ability, opportunity, or intelligence, but because they're viewing their life through a lens that limits them. They're seeing problems where there might be possibilities. They're labeling setbacks as signs to quit instead of signals to grow. They've been conditioned to interpret rejection as personal failure rather than redirection. And it's not their fault. Most people inherit their perspective from others, parents, culture, media, past experiences, and they live out those borrowed beliefs as if they're absolute truth. But the moment you realize that your perspective is not fixed, that it can evolve, that you can choose a new way of seeing, it's like discovering a secret doorway in a room you thought was locked. That shift, even if subtle, changes everything. Perspective is the difference between stress and strategy, between being overwhelmed and being in control. Think about it. When you believe everything is happening to you, you feel like a victim. You feel powerless, reactive, defensive. But when you shift and begin to believe that everything is happening for you, your entire posture changes. You lean in instead of leaning back. You ask better questions. You stop wasting energy resisting what is, and you start investing energy in what could be. That single switch from to me to for me has helped people rise from heartbreak, loss, failure, and fear, not just to survive, but to thrive with deeper purpose. Sometimes the only thing separating pain from purpose is perspective. The same experience that breaks one person can build another, and it's not because of genetics or luck, it's because of how they chose to see it. They found meaning in the mess. They saw their struggle as a setup for strength. They looked at the chaos and found clarity. That's not toxic positivity, that's empowered perspective. It doesn't deny reality, it redefines it. When you shift your perspective, your language changes. You stop saying, "I have to," and start saying, "I get to." You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" You stop blaming others and start taking ownership. You begin to see every challenge as a mirror reflecting back to you what you most need to grow through. That kind of mindset doesn't just change your outcomes, it changes who you become in the process. And here's what's wild. Often, your circumstances don't need to change for your life to improve. Your job might still be the same. Your bank account might still be tight. Your relationships might still need work. But you are different. Your mindset is sharper. Your emotions are steadier. Your decisions are more aligned because you're no longer reacting from fear or scarcity. You're responding from clarity and vision. That's the hidden superpower of perspective. It empowers you to rise even before your results do. This shift can happen in an instant. One conversation, one insight, one moment where something clicks and you finally see it differently. Maybe you realize the obstacle isn't in your way, it is the way. Maybe you recognize that the people who doubted you were projecting their own fears. Maybe you understand that your worth was never tied to your achievements. These realizations don't always require years of work. Sometimes they just require willingness. A willingness to pause, to reflect, to question your assumptions, and to choose a more empowering lens. And once you experience that kind of shift, it becomes a habit. You start looking for the perspective that fuels growth instead of frustration. You train yourself to zoom out when you feel stuck. You ask, "What else could this mean?" You create space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you find wisdom. You find peace. You find the ability to act with intention instead of impulse. You begin to navigate life from a place of grounded vision rather than emotional chaos. Ultimately, what you see determines how you live. The story you tell yourself becomes the world you live in. So when you choose to see differently, you live differently, you relate differently, you lead differently, the people around you notice. They feel the shift in your energy, your words, your presence. And sometimes your shift in perspective inspires theirs. That's how change ripples. That's how one person shifting their lens can quietly, powerfully, begin to change the game for everyone around them. Courage is the catalyst. It's the spark that sets everything in motion, the bridge between intention and action, the moment you stop thinking about what you could do and actually do something about it. Without courage, ideas stay trapped in journals, dreams remain locked in the back of your mind, and potential lives dormant beneath the surface. But the moment courage enters the equation, everything changes. Not all at once, not with fireworks and fanfare, but with a quiet decision that says, "I will no longer let fear decide my future." Most people are waiting for the fear to go away before they act. They think courage means being fearless, but it doesn't. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision that something else matters more. Fear will always be present when you're standing at the edge of growth. It's part of the process. But courage doesn't wait for the fear to subside. Courage acknowledges the fear, looks it in the eye, and moves anyway. It says, "You can come along for the ride, but you're not driving this car." That's what makes courage so catalytic. It initiates change in real time. The second you choose courage, even in the smallest way, you alter the trajectory of your life. You apply for the opportunity you once thought was out of reach. You speak the truth you've been holding back. You make the call, start the project, draw the boundary, take the leap. And in doing so, you send a message, not just to the world, but to yourself, that you are no longer playing small, that you're no longer waiting for perfect, that you're ready to bet on your own potential. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quietest voice in the room, the one that whispers, "Try again." It's getting up after a fall when no one's watching. It's walking away from what's familiar, even when the unknown terrifies you. It's choosing to heal when it would be easier to stay numb. It's choosing to lead when you feel unqualified, to love when you've been hurt, to speak up when silence would be safer. And what makes it powerful is that every act of courage, no matter how small, compounds. One decision leads to another. One brave moment builds a foundation of self-trust, and that trust becomes the launch pad for everything else. Without courage, clarity doesn't matter. You can know what you want, have the perfect plan, visualize the outcome. But if you don't have the courage to take the first step, it all stays theoretical. Courage is the activation key. It turns potential into motion. It says we're not just talking anymore, we're doing. It's what separates those who dabble from those who commit, those who dream from those who build. Courage is the thing that breaks the loop of overthinking, because at some point you have to stop asking, "What if it doesn't work?" and start asking, "What if it does?" The truth is, you can train courage. You don't have to wait to feel brave. You just have to act, and the more you act, the more normal it becomes. The things that once paralyzed you start to feel manageable. You start to feel stronger, more grounded, more capable. You realize that discomfort isn't the enemy. It's the cost of entry to a meaningful life. You stop avoiding it and start leaning into it, not because it's easy, but because you finally understand that the only way to grow is to go through. Courage also reveals who you really are. It strips away the layers of performance and protection and shows you what you're made of. It teaches you that resilience isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. And the only way to build it is to face what scares you, to try, to risk, to dare greatly, knowing you might fail, but choosing to show up anyway. That kind of courage becomes magnetic. It inspires others not because you're perfect, but because you're real. It gives people permission to be bold in their own lives. When you lead with courage, you stop asking for guarantees. You understand that progress is messy, that growth is uncomfortable, and that sometimes the reward isn't a win, it's who you become in the pursuit. Courage unlocks new levels of possibility, not just because it changes your actions, but because it transforms your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hesitates and start seeing yourself as someone who moves, someone who acts, someone who leads, and in doing so, you start building a life that's not just safe, but meaningful, not just impressive, but real. And it all starts with that one decision to choose courage over comfort. That single moment where you decide, "This might be scary, but I'm going anyway," because that's the moment everything begins. That's the moment momentum starts. That's the moment where transformation takes root. Courage is, and always will be, the catalyst. Consistency builds momentum. It's not the big, dramatic actions that create real transformation. It's the small, repeated steps taken day after day, long after the excitement fades. Most people think they need more motivation to reach their goals, but what they really need is consistency. Because motivation is fleeting, but consistency creates rhythm, and rhythm is what carries you forward when your emotions are unpredictable. When you show up consistently, even in small ways, you begin to stack wins, and those small wins create a sense of progress, and progress fuels belief, and belief creates energy. That energy, that's momentum. Momentum isn't accidental. It's engineered by action. It's built by commitment, not convenience. It's what happens when you decide that your dreams are worth more than your distractions. It's what builds when you stop relying on mood and start relying on movement. Because here's the truth. If you only take action when it's easy, you'll never get anywhere worth going. But if you can learn to show up when it's boring, when it's uncomfortable, when no one is cheering you on, that's when the game changes. That's when growth becomes inevitable. Consistency builds identity. Every time you follow through on what you said you'd do, you cast a vote for the kind of person you want to become. It's not about intensity. It's about integrity. It's not about doing it all. It's about doing something. That one workout when you didn't feel like it. That one call when you were tired. That one post when you weren't sure it mattered. Those moments matter more than the big once in a while efforts. Because the person who can stay the course during the mundane is the person who will be ready when the moment arrives. There's something powerful that happens when you start becoming known to yourself as someone who follows through. You start trusting your own word. You stop negotiating with excuses. You stop needing external validation because you've built internal momentum, and that momentum becomes self-sustaining. It becomes less about the result and more about the process. You stop obsessing over outcomes and start focusing on inputs. You realize that success isn't found in the occasional burst of energy. It's built in the ordinary. It's hidden in the daily disciplines that no one sees but that shape everything you are becoming. Compound effect of consistency is invisible at first. You don't see the payoff right away. That's why so many people quit. They plant the seed, but they don't wait long enough to see it grow. They think the effort isn't working because the results aren't instant. But consistency is like gravity. It may be slow, but it's always working. And when it finally shows up, it does so exponentially. What once felt like a grind starts to feel like flow. The effort that used to exhaust you becomes second nature. You develop momentum that feels unstoppable, not because you're superhuman, but because you refuse to quit. Consistency also reveals your character. It strips away the need for approval and replaces it with discipline. It teaches you to respect the process. It humbles you. Because when you show up over and over again without the applause, you learn that the real reward isn't the recognition. It's who you become while no one's watching. And in that space, you build grit. You build confidence. You build capacity. That's why the people who go far aren't always the most talented or the most brilliant. They're the ones who were willing to do the reps, the ones who kept moving when everyone else was waiting to feel ready. Life will always test your consistency. There will be distractions, setbacks, and curveballs. There will be days when everything feels aligned and days when nothing does. But the commitment to keep showing up regardless, that's where the power is. Because every time you push through the resistance, every time you take one more step, every time you hold the line, you're not just creating motion, you're creating momentum, and that momentum starts to carry you. It starts to move things around you. It attracts people, opens doors, creates opportunities. It builds confidence not because everything is certain, but because you've proven to yourself that you can keep going even when it's hard. Consistency is what builds the foundation for every breakthrough. It's not glamorous, it's not always exciting, but it is always effective. And when the results begin to show, when people wonder how you did it, when they call it overnight success, you'll know the truth. It wasn't magic. It was repetition. It was showing up when it was tough. It was momentum built through movement, day after day, breath by breath. Consistency builds momentum, and momentum creates the unstoppable. When you look at what truly transforms lives, careers, and legacies, it's not just one massive event or one lucky break. It's the combination of clarity, perspective, courage, and consistency. These aren't just motivational buzzwords. They are powerful shifts that, when embodied, create a ripple effect in every area of your life. Clarity gives you direction, perspective gives you depth, courage gives you initiation, and consistency gives you momentum. Together, they form a blueprint not just for success, but for significance. Because when you are clear on who you are and what matters, when you choose to see challenges through an empowered lens, when you dare to act even when it's uncomfortable, and when you keep showing up long after the feeling has faded, you become unstoppable. You stop chasing change and start being the change. That's the moment where it all shifts. That's the moment where the phrase, "this will change everything," isn't just a bold claim, it's a lived truth. And the best part, it's not reserved for the chosen few. It's available to anyone willing to lean in, dig deep, and rise up. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to begin, and that beginning starts now.